Hello pilots and welcome to another episode of War Thunder Tutorials. I got some requests on the subreddit for a dive bombing tutorial, so that's what we're going to do today. I'm here on an island and we're going to go bomb a truck, but first of all, the process of dive bombing isn't very difficult. You can climb up to altitude, dive down at a target at a fairly steep angle and drop your bombs and fly away. It's not hard to hit the target like that. The problem is you want to do two things. You don't want to overspeed on your way down because you're going to tear off your wings or flaps or other things that you need. And you don't want to get too low because you get torn up by AAA usually. But that makes for a little bit of a problem because the higher up you let go of your bombs, the harder it is to hit that target. So what I've done is I've done some research. It was a little difficult to find good quality materials that explain the dive bombing process. But I found a great graph. Now the goal of this is going to be to apply those concepts to War Thunder. And it's a little bit of a challenge, but through a lot of trial and error, I've actually found a really good way to consistently hit targets without getting below 500 meters, and we can try below 1,000 meters, or at least staying above 1,000 meters, and still hitting that target dead on. I'm just outfitted with some 60 kilogram bombs on this aircraft here, and we're going to fly the Zero up and show you how it's done. Alright, so the first thing we need is a way to measure. We can measure our height, that's our altitude, so that's not a problem. We can measure our distance to the target, and that's fine because that's displayed underneath the vehicle. But then we need to display our distance from the target on the ground, no matter how high we are. And as it turns out, this radar up in the top right, that's a great way to measure that distance, because right now I'm 0 away, and those rings that go around it, they're very hard to see. If I put a little bit of a darker background on here, you can kind of see it. There's rings around the radar. Right now I'm passing the first ring, and as it turns out I just passed 1 kilometer away. I'm about to pass the second ring. That's 2 kilometers. I'm still watching, and almost at the third ring here, just about there. There's 3 kilometers. So it's a nice way to measure along the ground. So when I can measure this way, I can start to figure out, and yes, unfortunately, I was wrong in math class that I am actually going to use geometry. I can figure out how to get any angle on the target that I want. So let's say I'm going to get up to 1 kilometer. Okay, so I'll climb up to 1 kilometer, and I'm going to watch on my radar there for as soon as that target is about to enter the nearest ring, I'll be 1 kilometer up and 1 kilometer across the ground to the target. What that should mean is that if I point my nose at the target, I'll be going exactly 45 degrees down to the target. And we have a handy way of measuring this by using this view, which displays the angle. So there we are, we're at about 1 kilometer. And as I come down, I'm about 55 degrees actually, but messed that up a little bit because I was late talking, but you get the general idea. So it's all geometry. I'm 1 kilometer away from the target across the ground. I'm 1 kilometer up in the sky. If I can nose down instantaneously and actually on time because I'm not talking, then I'll go down to 45 degrees. Okay, so then what we want to do is we want to take our graphic that we looked at, and we want to find a way to replicate that 70-degree angle. There's a very good reason why you want to come in at a steep angle. So here I am flying in a straight line, parallel to the ground. I'm not diving at all. 0-degree angle. I'll just drop my bombs and try to hit that target. It looked pretty good. Yeah, I missed by a long, long way. So, if that was a 0-degree dive angle, let's try a 90-degree dive angle. Alright, so here I am flying at 1 kilometer up. I'm going to wait until the target is directly below me, try and get that 90-degree dive angle, which is straight down. I'm not going to wait until he's completely under me to start turning. So now we can come straight down at him. And if I've lined it up right, it's okay, but you can see I'm a little bit off to the left, come back, up, come back. Okay, and I still kind of screwed it up. The hard part about being at a 90-degree angle like that is if I'm not perfectly over the target when I flip over and start coming straight down at him, I have to do a lot of adjustments, and that's kind of hard to do because I have to roll the plane so much. Even to move 10 feet over, I got to roll the plane all the way on its side, come back around, roll the plane back, get rid of my lateral movement, and then I'm back on target. And by the time I finish doing that, 700 meters have passed by. So when I would have liked to drop at maybe 1 kilometer up and then pull out, so I'm flying at 500 meters, well, now I'm trying to drop at 1 kilometer up and I'm barely starting to pull out at 300 meters up. And usually what ends up happening is I'm way too low. That's not my goal. Or I just end up hitting the ground. And then I missed anyway, so what was the point? Alright, so as it turns out, there's a pretty easy way to repeatedly get that 70-degree angle, and it's with flying at an altitude of about 1,750 meters, just to make it easy, 1750, and then you're going to start to dive in on the target when it crosses that innermost ring in there. But I've kind of worked out a little bit of a procedure to help guide our bombing. So what I've done here is I've flown back and forth against this east-west line, just gaining altitude. Now I'm up to altitude. Great. I'm going to try and keep that target on the north-south line. And you don't have to do this in-game. It's just for practicing. It helps you tell if you're wandering left or right when you're trying to hit the target. So I'm going to come around and drop back down to my 1750 meters. I'm going to fly at the target. Now I'm going to dive when he hits that first ring. But right now when he's in that third ring, throttle all the way down, put my dive flaps down, which are called combat flaps. And I'm going to slow down, and by the time I get to the point where I want to dive, I'll move my view indicator up. By the time he crosses that inner ring, I should be hitting right about 250, which I am. Come inside the target and dive on him. And this dotted line right here, the dotted circle, I'm going to put that right on him when it hits 1 kilometer. Drop the bombs. Throttle back up. There, we never crossed 600 meters. And we got him. So we never got below 600 meters. We just killed that target with a fighter. Because we throttled back, and because we put our flaps down, we never went too fast to tear the wings off or do any other damage. And we did it in a way that's repeatable every single time. So let's do it again. So I find this carries over pretty well across aircraft. In the last plane we had the 0, we started at 1750 and I wanted to pull out above 500 meters. So that leaves 1250 of operating space, 1750 minus 500. Here, I still want that original 500 meters of distance between me and the ground, because the AAA certainly haven't got any less effective. But I'm flying at about half the speed, let's call it. I'm going to be going in at the same angle. So what I want to do is cut the vertical distance to my 500 meter mark in half. I want to cut my horizontal distance in half. So what I'm going to do is take that original 500 meters that I want to preserve, and then I'm going to add half of my operating area in the 0 to that. So if my operating area was 1200 meters, I'm going to say 600 meters. So where I really want to be is 1100 meters. We'll come down to 1100 meters. Now I never want to cross below 500. So realistically, I'm only 600 meters above the ground, I'll pretend. And then I'm just going to watch that radar again. But since I'm only half as high as I was before, I want to wait until I'm half as far away from the target across the ground before I dive in. So I'm going to watch this radar very carefully, and he's getting about close to half. So I'm going to come in. And again, I'm coming in at about 70 degrees. So that's exactly what I wanted to do. So you can adjust it across aircraft. In some of the jets, you'll be much, much, much higher than 1750. You'll end up going a lot faster in your dives, but you'll pull out and stay above that 500 meter mark again. That's the goal, is to stay above the AAA. The one other thing you have to pay attention to is how fast the bombs are going when you're dropping them. A jet will drop the bombs very, very fast. So the jets won't arc down to the target as much as they will in this biplane. So the jets can get away with putting a target really close to the middle of this crosshair. In the biplane, however, those bombs aren't going to be going as fast, and they're going to have a lot more arc to them. It makes them less accurate as well. It's a lot harder to bomb in a biplane from 500 meters up. So what we're going to do is watch that ring. Just crossed over that ring. So I'm going to put him right below that crosshair when I see he's getting close to 1 kilometer. And drop. I've dropped it when he reached the top little thumb screw in that center post there. So see how close we were. Oh, not that close. So you can see I was pointing well ahead of the target, and the bomb still dropped way behind him. So if I'm going to try and drop from 500 meters or so, what I really need to do is lead the target a lot more. So let's try that again. So if I'm going to look at what I just did, is I took the distance from the middle of the crosshairs to the top of that central cylinder, and I'm going to try and double that distance because that's how far ahead I led the target, and I missed by about an equal amount behind. And this is kind of how you can figure out where you need to aim. So now what I'm going to try and do is put the target on that little light patch of leather on the front of the plane. Now this is getting a bit ridiculous because we're using the biplane, but this is the best example of how to figure out how far ahead you have to lead your target. So throttle back. I'm going to watch him. Okay, he's getting close, and drop, because he just crossed into that light color of the leather. We'll see how close we got. I think these are only 10 kilogram bombs, so kind of hard to work with. There we go. So dead on shot. We never really went below 750 meters in a biplane and got that vehicle. So I hope you liked this episode. That kind of shows you the worst case scenario, and from there you should be able to figure out every other plane of War Thunder. It's going to be somewhere between the middle of the dashboard and the middle of that crosshair. So what I recommend is just get in a test flight and test it out, find your altitudes, start out with a 0 if you have one, or you could even start out with this biplane and do the altitudes I did, and figure out your optimum dive altitude for the given distance you need to be away from someone. Maybe you'll be, instead of 1200 meters of operational altitude, maybe you'll be at 3000 meters of operational altitude. So that puts you at an altitude of 3,500 meters in a jet, we'll say. Well, you'll want to start your dive when the target crosses the second ring then, when you're 2 kilometers away. So it's just all a matter of scaling it up and down and keeping that dive angle. Okay, so then here's the challenge. So we said we wanted to try and hit this vehicle without crossing the 1 kilometer altitude barrier. I'm set up here at 3,000 meters, which gives me 2,500 meters of operational space. He's just crossed the 4th circle, so I'm going to cut my engine, put out my dive flaps, because I'm going to start diving when he hits that 2 kilometers. So I doubled everything from the original tutorial. I'm going to wait till he hits that second ring. I'll drop down. I'm going to lead him a little bit more because I'm really high up. And I drop 2 60-kilogram bombs. I never cross below 2250, so 2,250 kilometers. So let's see how close I get. Probably have to dive to even see it. Oh, I hit the beach. So, use what you learned here. I delete them way more, so I probably should have put that target right in the cockpit. So I'm going to try that one more second attempt. I'm going to try and lead him to the bottom of this mount in the middle of the dash here. So we're going to cut throttle. Make sure the flaps are out. I'm going to wait till he hits that 2 kilometer mark because I've got 2,500, 2,400 or so meters of operational altitude. I'm going to put that right in here. Drop 2 bombs. Let's see. Yeah, it looks like it leveled out at about 2,100 meters. Throttle up. See how close that gets this time. Oh, still way behind him. So it's gonna be hard. But go ahead and do a video response for those of you who are set up to do this, and I want to see who can hit this target from the highest altitude. It'd be impressive. All right, well, I'll see you next time.